Hey everybody, so this is a video that I was going to wait to do until closer to the start of the season, but I really just don't want to wait anymore, so I'm going to do it now. We're going to talk about, and I'm going to try and predict who's going to be the leading fighter for each team this season. I did this video at the beginning of the season last year. It was probably one of the very first videos ever on this channel. And that video ended up being like 40 minutes long. I do not want this video to go that long, so I'm going to try and be a lot quicker this year than I was last year doing this. But I do have 31 teams to talk about, so it is going to take a little bit of time here. Also, obviously 31 teams are not going to fit on my whiteboard. So I have a list here on my phone of all the teams and who I think is going to lead the team in fights. So let's get right into it. The Anaheim Ducks. Anaheim, they still have a number of guys who are willing to drop the gloves, but they don't have that one true enforcer, that one guy who's going to be fighting way more than everyone else. So I think Josh Manson probably ends up leading the Ducks this year. Arizona, I have Lawson Crouse leading the Coyotes this year, and Lawson Crouse is not even penciled in the roster this year, making the opening night roster. But Arizona literally has nobody who fights. So Crouse, I assume he gets into the lineup at some point this season once injuries start to kick in, and then I assume even if he only fights 3 or 4 times this year, it will probably lead the Coyotes because they literally have no one else. Boston, I have Adam McQuaid. Boston's a pretty tough team, but I think McQuaid will be the leading fighter. Buffalo, I have Zach Bogosian. They have Bogosian and Bellew on the back end. It's probably going to come down to one of those two, and I think Bogosian will end up, if he can stay healthy, will be the leading fighter. Calgary Flames, they're a pretty tough team, but I think Garnet Hathaway is like their guy who's going to fight. So Hathaway, I expect to lead the Flames. Travis Hamonic will also have a number of fights for the Flames, but I think Hathaway's the tough guy for sure. Carolina Hurricanes, I have Michael Ferland, the new guy they just traded for. Carolina has been dead last in the league in fighting mages for the last number of years. Ferland is their first tough guy, and I don't know when. First time in a while that they've had anyone like him. So Ferland probably won't have to fight a lot to lead this team. Chicago, it really came down between, for me, it came down to between John Hayden and Brandon Manning, the new guy in Chicago, for who's going to lead this team. And I went with Brandon Manning. Chicago's not a generally tough team. John Hayden came in there last year and had a few fights and showed a willingness to drop the gloves. Now Manning, coming in from Philadelphia, I think is probably going to be their leading fighter. He's a pretty tough defenseman. Colorado Avalanche, they don't have a ton of toughness, but Nikita Zadorov, I think, will lead that team, and he's shown over the last few years that he's more than willing to play very physically, both in the hit department and dropping the gloves. So I think Zadorov leads the Avalanche. Columbus really doesn't have an overly tough team, but they do have quite a few veteran guys who will scrap here or there. Guys like Nick Foligno, Brandon Dubinsky, Boone Jenner. I think their leading fighter will end up being Josh Anderson. Still a very young player, but he's a tough kid, a power forward type, and I think it's not going to take a ton of fights to lead Columbus this year. Probably 4 or 5 will end up leading the team, and I think Anderson will probably get to that. Dallas Stars, this was a tough one. I mean, for years it's been Antoine Roussel is like your easy choice to lead the team, but Roussel's not there anymore. So without him, it's really tough to try and figure out where the toughness is going to come from with this Dallas team. I have Dylan Hetherington, the defenseman, leading Dallas in fights. He played a few games up in Dallas last year, and he got in, I think, 2 or 3 scraps in those few games. So he's shown a willingness to to drop the gloves, and I think he's going to be the one that ends up leading the team. Detroit Red Wings, that's another tough one to call. I say I have Justin Abdelkader. It could be Anthony Mantha. Maybe Tyler Bertuzzi starts dropping the gloves more. I mean, I really don't know with Detroit. I'm going to say Abdelkader for now, and then we'll have to see how the season goes along. But could be any number of guys with the Red Wings. The Edmonton Oilers, they're one of the toughest teams in the league. Absolutely. They have a number of guys who drop the gloves and will drop the gloves regularly. But I think Zach Kassian ends up leading the way. He's a real tough guy and certainly not shy when it comes to dropping the gloves. So I think, for a team with like Kassian, Lucic, Nurse, Jujhar Khaira, they've got a number of tough guys on that team, but I think Kassian will end up being the leading fighter. Florida Panthers, Michael Haley. Haley led the whole league in fights last year with 22. He was the only one even close to that high of a number. I don't think Haley gets to 22 again this year. I don't think he plays enough to get to 22 this year. Haley is probably not going to be an everyday player on this Panthers team, but he will see his fair share of games, and he'll probably be, even if he only plays 50 or so games, he's going to have probably 13 to 15 fights in those games. So he'll be near the top of the fight charts, both league-wide and certainly lead his team. Los Angeles Kings, Kyle Clifford. Clifford didn't fight all that much last year. He struggled with injuries, and then when he came back from injuries, his gloves were kind of glued on. He really didn't do anything fight-wise. And with the Kings late, for much of last year, I expect if he's healthy, I expect Kyle Clifford to go back to being the Kyle Clifford that we all are used to, and he'll lead that team in fighting. Minnesota Wild. Minnesota has a few guys that I think have potential to lead this team, but I think Marcus Foligno is going to end up with the most fights this year, because he'll definitely be a regular in the lineup. They've brought in some tough guys like Matt Hendricks, JT Brown, but I'm not sure how many games they're going to play or whether they'll be extra forwards or if they'll be in the everyday lineup. So we'll have to see how their lineup shakes out, especially in the bottom six. But I think Marcus Foligno, absolutely an everyday player for the Wild, so he'll probably lead the team in fights. Montreal, I have Nick Delorier, and I really don't see anyone else even coming close to him. I mean, he's their tough guy. The Nashville Predators, they don't have that, a real, fighter in their lineup. And the Austin Watson situation is interesting because is Austin Watson going to play this year? He's got himself in some trouble, and if he plays a full season, he's without a doubt Nashville's leading fighter. But he's got himself in legal trouble now with domestic violence issues, and if he ends up, being suspended or not playing this year for the Predators, they really are lacking in the toughness category. They don't have any real fighters on that team. So I guess if Watson's out, then Ryan Hartman would probably lead the team, although he doesn't fight all that much. So Nashville's an interesting situation in the toughness category. The New Jersey Devils, they're not an overly tough team. They've got a few guys willing to drop them, but they don't have like a true enforcer or anything. I say Miles Wood probably leads the team in fights. He's a tough kid out of Boston College, and he's shown over the past couple of years that he is willing to drop the gloves when needed. So on a team that's not overly tough, he's probably their leading fighter. The New York Islanders, I have Matt Martin leading that team. I think him returning to New York, where he's actually going to get a chance to play, unlike he did didn't last year in Toronto. I think Matt Martin is without a doubt their leading fighter. They also have Scott Mayfield on the back end who can fight, and Ross Johnston, who's not in the lineup, penciled in the lineup currently. He's an extra forward, but he's going to see a fair share of games this year, so he'll also have quite a few. The New York Rangers, Cody McLeod should easily lead that team. Even if he's not an everyday player, they really don't have any other toughness or regular enforcer type other than him. So Cody McLeod's going to lead the Rangers. The Ottawa Senators, again, they really only have one guy who fights a lot regularly. That's Mark Borowiecki, so he should easily lead the Senators. Philadelphia, Philadelphia is tough. They don't have anyone who you expect like 10-plus fights from, but they do have good team toughness and guys willing to stand up for each other. Wayne Simmons certainly has a chance to lead that team, but he hasn't fought as much the last couple of years as he did, say, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. So I think Radko Gudas probably ends the season as Philadelphia's leading fighter. The Pittsburgh Penguins, this is very easy. Jamie Oleksiak, he is the only toughness in that lineup. Oleksiak will probably have 8 to 10 fights this year, and like no one else will have more than 2. So Oleksiak is the clear tough guy in Pittsburgh. San Jose, they don't have a real tough guy at all. They've got a couple guys willing to drop the gloves when needed, but I'm going to say Brendan Dillon. He's probably their most likely fighter. If you were going into a game against San Jose and we're looking for someone to fight, Brendan Dillon's your best bet to get to drop the gloves. The St. Louis Blues, they all of a sudden have quite a tough team. St. Louis has a number of guys willing to fight. Nobody who I would expect to I guess a couple guys that could fight a lot and a few more guys that you expect like 2 or 3 from. But I'm going to say Pat Maroon probably ends up leading the team because I don't know how much Chris Thorburn is going to get into the lineup this season. Thorburn is a tough guy and certainly able and willing to fight, but I think Maroon is absolutely going to be an everyday player for them, and he's a tough enough guy to where if he fights 7 or 8 times, he probably leads the team. The Tampa Bay Lightning, I'm going to say Andy Andreoff for them. They brought Andreoff in from L.A. Because L.A. really wasn't playing him, and they've seemed to have moved on from him. So he goes to Tampa Bay, and on roster resource, he is penciled in on the 4th line. So if he's a 4th liner and plays, he's probably going to be their leading fighter. Toronto Maple Leafs, I think they're far and away, maybe not far and away, but they're definitely, I think, the softest team in the league. I think Nazem Kadri leads that team in fights because without Matt Martin, they really have no one else who even drops the gloves at all. So Nazem Kadri might only have 2 or 3 fights this year, but that's going to be enough to lead this Toronto team. Typical Mike Babcock team, just no toughness whatsoever. Vancouver, Antoine Roussel. For the years, he's been the guy in Dallas, and he's always been expected to fight quite a bit. And now going to Vancouver on their 4th line, he's going to be he's going to be their leading fighter, I would think. Vegas, Ryan Reeves. That's what Reeves is there for. He's their tough guy. If he's going to play a regular shift on that 4th line, he's going to be very physical, and he's going to get into a good number of scraps. So Ryan Reeves should lead Vegas. Washington, this is an obvious answer. Tom Wilson. Washington has like Wilson, who will fight 10 plus times a year, and then really no one else after that. So I think Wilson is clearly the favorite in Washington to lead the team in fights. And then the Winnipeg Jets. This is a really, really tough one to call because they have solid team toughness. They're a big team. They're a physical team. But they don't have anyone who really fights a lot. When you look at their group, Adam Lowry can go, but he doesn't fight a lot. Dustin Byfuglien doesn't fight a ton. Ben Sherratt can go, but he doesn't fight a lot. They'll get occasional fights out of star players like Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele, but there's no one guy that you look at and go, wow, that guy's the tough guy here. Brendan Lemieux could end up leading this team if he gets into the lineup. He's currently not, according to roster resource, slated to make the Winnipeg Jets lineup. He's going to be on the roster, but he'll be like an extra player. He's not slated in as one of the top 12 forwards right now. Preseason can change that. If he makes the team and plays regularly, then he certainly has a chance to. But with the roster the way it is right now and going by roster resource, I would say Dustin Byfuglien probably leads the team. But Winnipeg's a tough one to pick. But anyway, there you have it. Those are who I think will lead each NHL team in fights this year. Fighting is obviously way down than it was even 5 years ago, and certainly way down from what it used to be back in the old days. But there still are fights, and they happen, and every team has at least someone who's willing to stick up for their teammates and drop the gloves. So I cannot wait for hockey to be back, and I cannot wait for physical hockey to be back. And we'll see how right I am at the end of this coming season, and we'll see if I'm right about any of these guys, or who I'm right about in leading their teams and who I'm not. So there still could be some roster changes, although I don't expect any major difference between now and the start of the season, but we'll just have to see what happens. So like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media, check out offthewallhockey.com. All those links in the description below. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was not 40 minutes long this time. I kept it under 20, which is fantastic. And I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching.